Welcome back, everyone, to OpenLine. We are talking housing issues in Nashville and Middle Tennessee. We have with us Zac Oswald, attorney with the Legal Aid Society. We're talking about right now about rent. We'll move into home ownership and some of the problems there, concerns, but several calls. So let's go to Edward. Hello, Edward.
Yes.
Go right ahead.
All right. The high-rise that I live in is remodeling, but it's a Section 8 high-rise for elderly and handicapped people. So, but the thing of it is, they moved me from one room on one floor to remodel the room I lived in, and they moved me to another room. All right, I just recently signed a year's lease this month. So you already told me that they can't go up on my rent even though they remodeling the place until my lease runs out. All right, my question is, when they go to get my room done or everybody else's room done that they moved, can they put me somewhere else as far as another room? Because I already requested the room that I had, because the room I had was a whole lot better than where I'm at now. But I can understand they can put you anywhere they want to put you as far as remodeling purposes. But the thing of it is, I want to make sure I can get back to the room that I did move from. My question is, can they put you somewhere else if they desire to do it?
That's very interesting. Put you in another unit within that building. Can I ask you, I just like to ask a question.
Go ahead.
Can I ask you, how long have you lived there? So you signed a one-year lease just last month or something. How long have you lived there?
This month. I lived here for about 2 years, 2.5 years.
Okay.
Edward, do you live in Nashville?
Yes, I live in Madison.
Okay.
All right, what do you think? Okay, thank you, Edward. Thank you for your call. What do you think here?
So Edward, he mentioned living in basically an income-based property. So he's in a very specific, it's a program that is paid for by, in part by HUD, by the Department of Housing and Urban Development. And without making any specific guesses on Edward, there are properties for people who are 62 and over, for people who are 40 and over or disabled, and then there are family housing for people who are also income-based. And so all of those rules are very, very specific. So I'm not going to be able to answer his question exactly. But what I will say is the properties that are income-based, the landlords may have the right to increase the rent in the middle of the year for the lease, and that's specifically within guidance of either the IRS or within HUD when they change it, or again, because Edward said he was living in an income-based property, if Edward's income goes up or down, his income will also go up or down to make sure that he's paying approximately 30% of his adjusted gross income every month as his rent.
Okay.
His specifics about whether or not he could be moved from one unit to another are something that I'm just not going to be able to dig into tonight, but I would really encourage Edward to call our Nashville office to see if he can get some extra advice on this. And you can reach our Nashville office at 615-244-6610 and let them know you're having a housing problem, and we can try and see if we can figure out the answers for you, Edward.
So I was interested in that, and you're saying you need to research it. You don't know. It's possible they can move you and say, okay, we're going to move you back, but it's going to be a different unit, or it's possible they have to put you back in the same unit. You're not sure.
I'm not entirely sure, and that's partly because of the program that Edwards is going to tell us, what are his specific rights. But you noticed I asked, was he in Nashville? And that's because even for general tenants, there are two different bodies of law that affect what your rights are. If you live in a larger county in Tennessee, you're covered by what's called the Uniform Residential Landlord Tenant Act. And those are laws that are actually written out, they're placed in the Tennessee statutes, and they tell us what a tenant's rights are. But if you live in a rural county in Tennessee, there are only 4 laws that apply to you. They basically just say, this is how your landlord can kick you out, this is your right regarding an assistance animal, and these are your rights if you're a domestic violence victim. But everything else is based on what's in your contract or based on what the history of Tennessee law is, and Lord knows that a tenant's not going to be able to figure out what the history of Tennessee law is if it's not been written down for them. So it can be really confusing for tenants in Tennessee to not only figure out which law applies to them, but then once they figure out it's these rural county laws, what even are they?
Yeah. So there are many more protections for you if you're in Nashville.
Certainly more specific protections that you can look up and you can read what they are.
Interesting. Okay, let's go to Lena. Hello, Lena.
Hello?
Hello, Lena. Go right ahead. What's on your mind?
Yes. I have a situation that may be reversed from renters to landlords, but I'm talking about landlord evicting or uprooting a renter out of the apartment that he's renting, who is violating, doing all kinds of criminal, criminal things, and disturbing neighbors in an HOA private home, which is not a HUD or anything like that. This is like a private. What rights or what process can the landlord take other than talking to the board association or the management company or filing a claim with the police or, filing a claim down to, Metro or whatever? What can they do? What can the landlord do in order to make it better for the neighborhood that is complaining and the tenant who is violating the board rules and everything?
Okay. All right. Do you understand this question?
I think I've got it.
Okay. Go. Take it away.
Lena, it sounded to me like you were asking what is the ability for a landlord to get a tenant out of their home. And so we can talk about the eviction process for a second. Again, the laws are different depending on which county you live in Tennessee, but the notices that the landlord has to give range anywhere from 0 days notice before filing for a court eviction, if it's a non-payment of rent in one of those large counties, all the way to 3, 7, 14, or 30 days, and maybe even 60, depending on what your lease agreement would say. So the first thing to figure out is, what is the situation for which you're trying to evict this tenant? She mentioned maybe some criminal behavior or something like that. I think she was calling from Nashville, so I'm going to look to the Uniform Residential Landlord-Tenant Act, and I'm going to find the statute that talks about criminal behavior by a tenant, and that's TCA 66-28-517. It says if the tenant does anything that threatens or harms another person on the property or the property itself, that the landlord has to give 3 days notice to terminate that tenant. If the tenant hasn't vacated the property by that point, then we start the actual court process, and that starts by the landlord filing a detainer warrant. It has to be served on the tenant, meaning they have to either get a copy in person or it has to be taped to their door and mailed to them. That gives them a court date, and that makes sure that we have due process. The tenant gets the right to defend themselves. The landlord gets to say to the judge, this is the reason that I want them out. And the judge ultimately makes the decision on whether or not the tenant has to move.
Interesting. Okay, Lena, I hope that answers your question. Let's go to Henry. Hello, Henry.
Hello. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening. Go right ahead.
Yeah, I have a question. Most of my life I've lived in a house, and recently I've been disabled and in disability, and I just turned 65 last year, and now I'm on Social Security, I guess. And I was just wondering, is there an avenue for people like me to get assistance in either buying a house or leasing a house?
All right. What about that?
So, Henry is correct.
Right.
What I would ask Henry to do is to look to see if there are HUD approved counselors in the area. And a HUD approved counselor can look over what is happening in his situation, figure out whether or not he is going to be able to qualify for home ownership. There are a lot of idiosyncrasies there. What's his credit score? What's his income per month? Things like that. If for some reason Henry is not going to be able to get into a property, he mentioned being 65 years or older and being disabled, that probably means that he's on a limited income. I'm going to instruct Henry to look to see what type of senior-only housing is available in his area. And again, that's back to that housing and urban development program that we were talking about, where the rents are subsidized, where Henry would only pay 30% of his income every month. So you could imagine a situation Henry's on Social Security disability. It's $900 a month as an example. His rent would be $300 a month if he could get into one of those apartments. It's very difficult to get into one of those apartments, as you can imagine. They're fairly sought after. But while Henry is kind of trying to make these decisions, calling in there, or you can do a search through tnhousingsearch.org. That is a website administered by the Tennessee Housing Development Agency here in Tennessee, where landlords can advertise properties that are available, and you can even search specifically for that senior-only housing.
And all right, this might be a good time to mention the average monthly apartment. So rent in Nashville, how it's gone up. These are numbers that I'm looking at here. 2011, the average monthly rent in Nashville, $897. 2021, the average apartment monthly rent is $1,600, $1,644. So that's an 83% increase.
Amazing.
That's astounding. And so that's rough.
Absolutely.
And does that mean that you're busier than ever?
It certainly means that more and more people are going to qualify for our services. As things like rent go up, what we see is more people moving out to the rural areas, but that means that their transportation costs move up, or they're further away from safe and edible food, from healthy food. So they're going to start eating poorly, and that's going to rise their health costs. So we see that these housing costs, as they continue to rise, are really causing people to spiral, and not only affecting their housing, but they're affecting their ability to support their family. They're affecting the jobs that they're choosing because they're trying to pick something that maybe is closer but doesn't pay as much. And they're affecting their health as well. And those things only continue to spiral and make legal aid more important than ever. Not only the housing help that we do, but the help that we do helping secure benefits for people, the help that we do helping people with their employment and unemployment claims, helping people who have gotten into a bad situation or in a domestic violence situation and need to escape to safety. It's increased our business tenfold.
I bet. That's shocking. All right, we're going to take a break, and then we will come back. Take more calls. If you're on the line, hold on. We will get to your call. Come back right after this.